Head to the polls tomorrow. One viewer asked why Kentucky doesn't allow independent voters to cast a vote for primary candidates. WKYT's Victor Puente has the answer to tonight's Good Question.
Today's Good Question actually came into WKYT Investigates. Sheila asked, why is Kentucky still holding closed primaries? She said, I want to be able to vote for who I think will benefit myself, my community, and my state best. In today's world, you would think we'd be given that option. Well, Sheila, your question is really one for lawmakers. State law determines who can vote in primary elections, and Kentucky is one of 9 states with closed primaries. KRS 116.055 says in part, no person shall be allowed to vote for any party candidates or slates of candidates other than that of the party of which he or she is a registered member. Those voters can still vote in special elections, like the one to replace Senator Ralph Alvarado, which are open to everyone. Some states have open primaries, where you can vote in any party's primary, no matter how you are registered. When Secretary of State Michael Adams was on Kentucky Newsmakers in April, he said that's probably going too far, but he would support a change opening Kentucky's primaries to unaffiliated voters.
I don't want to have Democrats voting in my primary, and I don't want to have Republicans voting in the governor's primary. That's not fair. But I think letting independent voters pick one, that's what a lot of states do. New Hampshire does that, Arizona does that. And that makes the politics a little more centrist, if you will, and not as extreme, because you've got independents that can change the result of the election.
Well, during that appearance, Adams also said he didn't see that change happening anytime soon. If you have a good question, you can email goodquestion@wkyt.com. And I'll see you on WKYT Mornings.